Welcome to the Paranormal News Insider for the week of December 21st, 2021. And this is officially episode number 497. And this is your host, Dr. Brian D. Parsons. And we are live on the Paranormal King radio network at paranormalking.com. I got a little caught up there on December 21st. It just kind of, I always get flashbacks. And of course, 2021, looking at that number, think back 9 years ago today. I was thinking about this earlier today, December 21st, 2012. We had the Mayan apocalypse. We all thought it was going to end sometime. We didn't know what time. I was thinking it's got to be like 5 p.m. Eastern. So it would be, 2 p.m. Out in California. I don't know, but it never happened. Obviously, we're all still here. The calendar keeps on flipping. We didn't collide with Nibiru or whatever was supposed to happen. I think we're supposed to be in a black hole or whatever. But yeah, I was thinking about that earlier today with the date. And of course, today is also the winter solstice, or if you're in the southern hemisphere. I don't even know if I have any listeners from the southern hemisphere, but if I do, that's awesome. I wish I was down there right now. It would be the December solstice. And of course, it's the shortest period of daylight and the longest period of nighttime. And if you're at the North Pole, it's dark for 6 months. Yike. It's kind of like here in Ohio, it feels like. South Pole, however, you're going to have 6 months of no sunsets, which sounds pretty fun. But yeah, today I think it's a perfect day to start. Of course, it's Tuesday. Perfect day to start the top 10 paranormal news stories of 2021. Being midwinter, and historically, this is a time of rebirth. And when you look back and you also look ahead to the year coming up, make sure you have enough food stored up and wood saved to burn to keep your home warm and all those things. Historically, for us, it's just am I going to have to work on New Year's Day? Can I sit up and watch the ball drop kind of stuff? So it's not that important. Nowadays as it was historically, but I think it's a great day to start the top 10. So tonight it is the official beginning of the countdown of the top 10 paranormal news stories of 2021. So we'll start reflecting backward at the year that was. And you do tend to forget some of the stuff that happened during the year. I know I do, until I go back and I look at my show notes and I think about some of these stories and some of the off the wall stuff that happens during the year, as well as some of these bigger stories. Sometimes you forget about it, especially if it happened back in January. It just seems like so long ago, and we tend to forget. And that's one of the reasons why I like doing the top 10. It's not just for filler. Well, sometimes it is just for filler, but it's also to take that time to reflect back and think about where we've come and what we've experienced throughout the year as far as the paranormal is concerned. And we all do that anyway. We talk about things, around Christmas, and we reflect back. We look at some of the stories, and Google, I'm sure, will have these commercials on pretty soon that'll show the top viral moments of the year, and we'll laugh and go, oh, I remember that dog barking and looking at the cat hit the TV, or whatever it is. The memes that we remember, or some of the stories that have hit home for us, and some of the good things and bad things. And this is our way, or my way, I guess, of doing that for the paranormal as well, the paranormal news, looking at a lot of these stories. And gosh, I just, 12 years I've been doing this, the countdown, since 2010. I guess that's 13 years. So didn't do a countdown. I started the show back in 2008. Did not do a countdown. Granted, started it in September of 2008, and it was just a monthly show. So I only did a handful of shows that year. 3 shows, I guess. So really no... Wait, 4 shows. I did 4 shows that year. So really no countdown. There was no thought about doing it, and did the show the next year. Was also monthly, so I only did 12 shows in 2009. 2010 we started going weekly in September, and that's when I decided to do a top 10, and proved pretty popular, and I was pretty surprised by that. And it was also something, so many stories, again, so much stuff you cover in a year's time, you forget, and you tend to not remember stuff. And I like to keep that handy, and it's also part of the show's goal. It's not just to give you the latest week's stuff so you can think back. I mean, we have, this day and age, 2021, we have a very short attention span. I'm surprised Paranormal News Show or any paranormal show is an hour anymore. I'm surprised they're not just like 10-minute interview shows at this point. But, um, all podcasts are, I'm surprised they're not shorter than what they are. Shouldn't pick on the paranormal, but um, I think we jump from things to things too quick, and we don't really look back. And you'll notice a lot of patterns if we start talking about some of the historical top 10s, which tonight I think we're going to look back at last year's top 10, even though I talked about number one last week. We tend to see a lot of patterns. We see things that happen year in, year out. And the thing with the paranormal is people come in, they hang around for a little bit, and then they move on. Very few of us are in here for very long, and I'm talking like a decade or more. People just tend to move on. They have families, they change jobs, and their lifestyle changes, so they just kind of move away from it. Maybe they buy a Corvette, midlife crisis, marry their secretary. I don't know what you do. Maybe it changes your life, and you kind of forget about this stuff. And it just seems like it happens a lot. I mean, I can look back at the crowd of people that I used to have in my early shows versus the people that are here now in the chat room, and it's a different crowd. It's different people, and that's okay. I feel like it makes me feel old because I feel like I'm talking to a whole new generation of people. But nonetheless, it's exciting. It's fun. And I love this time of the year to, again, reflect back and talk about stories and make people have some aha moments where they remember these things and look back. But before we get too carried away into the year that was, we do have a couple of stories, and one kind of big developing story, I suppose, that may or may not be something we talk about next year's top 10. But first, we're going to kick it off in cryptid news, and it's kind of a reflection moment for me as well with 2014. Looking back, man, it makes me feel, gosh, really old now. My second to last book I wrote. My book, Handbook for the Amateur Cryptozoologist, was listed in the top books of 2014 as described by Lauren Coleman. So I made the list, the top 10 list for books on cryptozoology with my book. It was described as the best guidebook for the cryptozoologist in training of 2014, although I think it was really the only one that was published that year. But that's okay, I'll take it. I graced this list one more time the following year as I added a foreword by Lauren Coleman and launched a second edition of the book. I updated a few things in it and added that piece to it as well. I was very proud to do that. Never thought of really involving anybody else to try to help sell books or put somebody else's name on the front of the book, but I'm very proud of that, to have Lauren Coleman as a part of that book. And of course, if you've been to the International Cryptozoology Museum in Portland, Maine, look for my book. I planned on going there, gosh, the last few years, just never really got around to it. I want to see my book in a museum. That would be really, really cool to see. But I also would like to see it in a bookstore. I've seen it in libraries, but I don't know. We'll see. Coleman opened, let's see, he's got one in Portland. I'm trying to remember. He's opening up a second museum a little further north. Portland's right there on the kind of down south there on the border. He's opening up another one. I can't remember where, but he's gonna probably continue to do operate the museum, make local appearances. I don't think he's gonna slow down or stop anytime soon. He's kind of pretty much like a living legend as far as most people are concerned here in cryptozoology, and he's obviously in a lot of other fields as well. But Yeah, I don't think he's going to be slowing down anytime soon. But as far as the books are concerned, I always look forward to this list. I kind of like um, look forward to some books that I missed because sometimes I don't see all these books that pop up. And uh, there was a few here I had not heard of, so I threw them into my. I hate to advertise for Amazon, but I put them on my little list of books that I want on Amazon, which is probably pushing. It's probably pushing about 100 right now. And it seems like I add one a week. It feels like, and then I'll buy one, maybe one a month. So I'm falling behind. It's probably well over 100. Um, but again, I was honored to have that book there 2 years in a row. And this year, there's a plethora of books that Coleman shares on his blog honoring various cryptid creatures. And of course, Bigfoot is the big guy here in the United States, and the biggest Bigfoot book of the year. I don't know how big they get. That's his normal size book. You know what I mean? Big as far as what he felt was the big Bigfoot book of the year. Michelle Y. Solier, her Bigfoot of Maine book, which includes an introduction by Lauren. So maybe a little biased there, but Bigfoot of Maine, the big book of the year. Christopher Packer took home the Regional Cryptozoology Book of the Year with Fantastic Beasts from Legend and Folklore, Mythical Creatures of Maine. So there you go, a little regional favoritism, but still, from what I've seen on that book, it's pretty good. David Weatherly has released the Regional Cryptid Series of the Year with Monsters of Big Sky Country, Peach State Monsters, Palmetto State Monsters, and Monsters of the Tar Heel State. Pretty good series there. We've got Kenny Irish, the General Cryptid Book of the Year with American Cryptids in Pursuit of the Elusive Creatures. We got the Historical Cryptozoology Book of the Year goes to Monsters in the Anglo-Saxon World, Basilix and Beowulf by Tim Flight. Bigfoot Newcomer Author of the Year goes to Evergreen Ape, the story of the Bigfoot by David Norman Lewis. My favorite cryptozoology release of the year, voted the best cryptid guidebook of the year by Lauren Coleman, is The Essential Guide to the Loch Ness Monster and Other Aquatic Cryptids by Ken Gerhard. Very good book. Great book, actually. Really enjoyed it. Check out the rest of the list, which includes books on the Loch Ness Monster, the Champlain Monster, Bigfoot, the Patterson-Gimlin film. It also has some Bigfoot calendars and a whole lot more. Find that at cryptozoonews.com. And Lauren Coleman made this list. It's off of his personal blog, and that's why sometimes you get that little bit of not just Maine, but sometimes Northeast kind of flair to it, or books that he was involved in seem like they're always the top ones. But like I said, he's got his hands involved in a lot of stuff, so it's no surprise that he gets himself involved with some of the bigger books or the best books. Not just saying that because he was involved with mine, but that's kind of why it's a little biased, of course. But I don't see any books that were outside of this giant list that were released this year. So I don't think he's really ignoring anything. Just what he's seeing. And I've always loved his lists of books. He also does a lot of other stories. The cryptid deaths of the year, people who have passed away, who have been great researchers, or people who have done good work. We also have the other thing that I look forward to every year, the Golden Yeti Award, announced by Lauren. The Golden Yeti is basically, it used to just be called the Cryptozoologist of the Year, but I guess you're a Cryptozoologist of the Year, you get the Golden Yeti. In 2021, this award went to Bigfoot researcher, writer, and editor of Bigfoot Times, a very long-standing magazine. This guy has done a lot of work. Patterson-Gimlin film, tons of information behind it. Anything and everything that's gone on in the Bigfoot world, this guy's been researching behind it. So, as Lauren said, it's long overdue for this person to be the cryptozoologist of the year. Couldn't agree more. It's the amount of work when you read through this guy's bio, what he's done, what he's accomplished. I've heard the name a number of times, but you never really realize what somebody's done until you stand back and really look at their whole book of works, I guess. Daniel Perez was announced as the cryptozoologist of the year for 2021. And UFO news, big story this week. Well, it was last Wednesday, but still making the rounds. It's official. The National Defense Authorization Act for fiscal year 2022 passed last Wednesday. What does that mean as far as the paranormal is concerned? Well, under Section 1683 of the very thick, I don't know what you call it, big plop of paper, $770 billion annual defense bill, the big bill. That's a lot of money, $770 billion. Secretary Lloyd Austin and National Intelligence Director Avril Haines they've got to establish, quote, an office, organizational structure, and authorities to address unidentified aerial phenomena, unquote, within 180 days of when President Biden signs the bill into law, which hopefully is coming soon. Last month, you might remember the Pentagon quietly announced it had formed the Airborne Object Identification and Management Synchronization Group. That's horrible. To oversee UFO investigations. This is kind of a political ploy, kind of a chess move. A lot of people feel that it's just an attempt to keep the public at a continued distance, as well as even levels of the government, from learning exactly what is going on in the skies over the U.S. And I think we've had enough of that. It's not so much of disclosure, but just let us know what's happening right now, at least. Stop covering stuff up. Stop compartmentalizing everything. And let's know what's going on. Let's be prepared here. Share the information, because obviously a lot of members of the general public are very, very smart and able to figure a lot of these videos and a lot of these things out. So stop the games, I say, and let's have this information. Stop playing around. And with that, that's our news. But I want to look back here at last year. Where did I put that? 2020 was not a fun year for most of us. It was a pretty scary year, obviously, with the global pandemic occurring, and nobody thought it was going to be as big as it was. And I'll tell you, I was on vacation back in, kind of late, a little past mid-January, I think January 18th. I flew out to Arizona, and I was out in Phoenix for a week and flew home. And, you heard stories, you heard talk about it, stuff overseas for months, and you don't really think things are ever going to get bad here in the United States or North America. You think, European stuff is European stuff, or Asian stuff is, it's not going to happen here. Who cares? Kind of the least worry on my mind. And I was out in Arizona, kind of living a baseball dream, hanging out with members of the team formerly known as the Cleveland Indians, and just having a wonderful time. Wasn't worried about global pandemics or anything like that. And flying home, I went through Detroit airport and saw a lot of people wearing masks, and that's kind of when it clicked for me. And then it wasn't too long after that things kind of went south, not directionally, but just with the global pandemic, and it hit home. It hit here, and I was one of those people that had to go to work every day. I didn't have that. Some people will call it a luxury. Other people will call it, I lost my job, or I wasn't able to work, or I had to quit because I couldn't, didn't want to deal with it. So maybe I was lucky. I don't know, but I was pretty much forced to go to work every day around this and deal with crazy people. who were buying up all the toilet paper, things like that. But if you're listening to the show, you made it. And you've made it thus far through 2021's craziness as well. But looking back on the top 10 paranormal news stories of 2020, kind of the number 10 story was, man, this whole thing, I think, the whole year was just no good news. I don't think anything great happened in this lineup. Number 10, probably the darkest shadow and the latest of very cloudy days for MUFON, the Mutual UFO Network, was Jan Harzan, arrested on July 3rd of charges of soliciting a minor for the purpose of engaging in sexual activity. He just disappeared. I haven't really heard much about him or after, and MUFON just kind of went into hiding, and they've made the adjustment to move from out west to back to Cincinnati, and it's finally complete. I think they finally just announced last month that everything is finally moved. They need to get it in gear and get going, but this is not a good story. And you remember it was around that time too that the Monolith saga of December. There was also the Brazil UFO crash story that was going on, the workout ghost video that people were mesmerized by, the Wisconsin Bigfoot bulletin. A lot of other stories were cropping up there towards the late part of the year, but this hung in there in the top 10. Number 9, lake monsters other than Loch Ness. So there was a lot of different stories from all over the world that made the news as far as monsters from different places. Got one. Where was this at? Kayaker in the Patagonia region of Argentina. Nahuelito, I remember that one. Saw a little something swimming. And we also had some crazy looking creatures. You know, anytime an animal from the depths comes up and dies and it's on the beach, everyone's confused. We also had Ogopogo was in the news from Lake Okanagan. Let's see, Puerto Vallarta, Mexico. Somebody took a picture of this strange, it looks like a dolphin with giant teeth and no fins, just a big tail. Yeah, just a whole bunch of just stories that just kind of all slammed together. There was a champ challenge. I guess the Lake Champlain monster isn't getting any love anymore because Loch Ness monster is taking it all away. So they did a champ challenge to try to get people to look out for the elusive Lake Champlain monster. I don't think anybody really cares. They're not selling T-shirts, but they get maybe some sightings. Maybe that'll get a little bit of energy going behind that story. Yeah, of course, a lot of Loch Ness stuff, but yeah, this is a collection of monster stories, lake monster stories. We don't usually get too many. You get a few fringy ones, maybe from Ogopogo, maybe from some other region, but this is just like all over the place. One from China, a guy took a picture from really far away and a little black dot in the lake. For some reason, it was a big deal. I don't know, but yeah, very intriguing stories, but nothing really relevant came out of it. So it sat down there at number 9. Number 8, another sad story. Mad Mike Hughes, who was, viewed as a flat earther. Everybody gave him stuff for that. Mad Mike Hughes died from injuries resulting from a crash. So he had a self-made rocket that he launched from the back of a little car carrier, and on February 22nd, he launched from Barstow, California, and it's kind of sad because you can watch it it was on live on social media. I think it was on Twitter, like instantly right after it happened. And rocket launches up, it hit the parachute, and the parachute got caught in the wash of the jet, which was steam. It's a steam-powered rocket. And the steam just disintegrated the parachute. So as soon as it left, it was over. He apexed, and then the rocket came right back down to earth, and sadly that was it. Um, but in the weeks after his death, a lot of stuff came forward, and came out that he wasn't really into the flat Earth as much as what people thought. It was really more just of a ploy to get attention for his ongoing story. And the saga with Mike Hughes lasted a long time and has been associated with flat Earth stories in the past. And was really, I, this story was, I don't dare I say lucky, because it happened pre-pandemic. This is a story that probably wouldn't have gotten much attention had it happened, in April or even late March. But happening in February got a lot of attention. It lasted in the news for quite a bit, and it was kind of nice to see him kind of vindicated from the flat Earth group, and that he was just a daredevil. It had nothing to do with him trying to get high up to see the curve of the Earth or anything like that. That was speculated or talked about, but basically that was his agent kind of using that as a way to get attention, which it worked. And sadly, with his I don't say poor rocket design, but just self. When you do stuff like that by yourself, sometimes things happen, and unfortunately, it cost him his life. Number 7 that year, SpaceX UFOs. And UFOs, you didn't see, I was doing the finger quotes. Lots of stories all over the world, all over the United States. Numerous photographs, numerous sightings, numerous phone calls of not just the string of lights in the sky, but also the rocket launches created a lot of controversy and a lot of confusion in the skies, all the way from here in the United States, New Zealand, Canada, Belgium, all over the place. People just talking about this. And it's also when the Kessler syndrome started being talked about seriously, which the Kessler syndrome is when we start to get a crowded orbit full of satellites, whether it's near Earth or even higher up. These satellites, if they start crashing into each other, could cause a cataclysmic snowstorm, basically, of things hitting into each other, which would create just so much debris that we wouldn't be able to launch anything else or get off this rock if we have to. And, the fact that Starlink is adding a crazy amount of satellites into space, it really began to be talked about in a serious manner, and not just Starlink, with SpaceX's Starlink's launching potentially upwards of 20,000 plus satellites up into space, but other companies such as Google and a couple of others. There's one that went out of business, but other companies are looking to do the same thing with a satellite constellation. So, yikes. And of course, there's all that talk the last 2 years of UFO sightings being on the rise. Well, I think that had a lot to do with it. Number 6 on the list last year was another very sad story. It was probably one that, it's really hit me hard, because I'd really followed this location for a long, long time, and it's really, really sad to see this happen. And this is actually tied into Chupacabra as well, believe it or not. And that was the Arecibo Observatory, which December 1st came crashing down at 7:55 a.m. Eastern Time. There had been some structural damage from Hurricane Maria in late 2017, as well as earthquakes that put a strain not only on the facility, but also on the budget for the facility. There was a cable break in August of 2020, which brought a little concern to the structural integrity of the platform. So that platform is a big dish that sits in a kind of a natural depression. Pretty sure it's a meteorite had struck there, so it created a natural depression in the ground. They put the satellite dish there, which is just a bunch of panels on the ground. And of course, they had the observatory structure hanging over the top of that, strung out on cables. And some of those cables started to fray. And on November 6th, the second cable broke, which now created a high risk of self collapse. The National Science Foundation did a lot of surveys with drones and other technology, determined that the 900-ton platform was going to have to be destroyed. It was decommissioned on November 19th, and that was sad enough. But then to have it collapse on December 1st was really heartbreaking to see the video of it just destroying itself. Arecibo has made a lot of discoveries and has been something that's keeping us safe from asteroids crashing into this planet that we may not see coming now. And it's a lot of things that still data to go that's been collected from this observatory that we're still looking at, that's still making some headway for us in as far as understanding what's happening in the skies above. Number 5, mysterious Western U.S. drones. This was a very concerning story that unfolded also early in the year. Colorado, Nebraska, Kansas had been inundated with calls of swarms of giant drones, and nobody knew. Nobody taken any kind of ownership of it. Thought it was military drones. People thought it was commercial things, and it ended up doing all sorts of things. The police were looking for it. They launched aircraft trying to find these. They had people driving around looking for vehicles that were control vehicles for these drones, and a lot of panic behind this in the out west. Big story in 2020. Probably the most viral story of January, of course, until what we would call, back then we called it the novel coronavirus. And of course, the sad news with Kobe Bryant and his daughter. They perished in the helicopter crash in Calabasas, California. That kind of shifted our attention. But this was a big story. It was all over the news, all over the paranormal media as well. It's strange, though, because they started to dissect all this stuff, and it seemed like a lot of these sightings weren't really what they thought they were. And some legitimate sightings of drones here and there, but most of the stuff was just people reacting to things. And unfortunately, we never got an answer to what was really, truly going on. Number 4 last year was the Loch Ness Monster radar and sightings. So a number of sightings happened, and we also had a big hoax. The guy, Steve Chalice, took a purported picture of a large, looked like a large catfish, which is what it was. He was saying that the Loch Ness Monster was a catfish, but really what he had done was taken a catfish photo and superimposed it onto an image taken on Loch Ness. So it was probably the biggest Loch Ness Monster hoax of last year. Well, it was the biggest Loch Ness Monster hoax of last year. Lots of sightings, most of which were on webcams. But there towards the fall, there was a couple of radar photos that were taken, strangely, on opposing craft that take people out to sightsee out on Loch Ness. So go figure. The number 3 story of last year, U.S. government research on UFOs. This all kind of started on Valentine's Day. Popular Mechanics published some new documents that showed the U.S. government was doing some investigating and research into UFOs and related phenomena. And a lot of other news organizations jumped in, like Motherboard, and kind of forced the Army and other organizations to kind of open up. And I kind of wanted to mention Tom DeLonge this week. I had to, after talking to Jim Mallard in the Mallard Report last week about this. So yeah, To the Stars Academy was in the news last year with all that. A lot of organizations, Black Vault, tried to get some information, and a lot of stuff started to bubble up toward the surface last year. And of course, that led to this year's report on all that too. But last year, it kind of started to bubble up toward the surface. And of course, we were talking about the Advanced Aerospace Threat and Identification Program, ATIP. Yeah, that's right. And all the stuff that was going on was all over TV, all over the news. A big story that was really bubbling, but just hit number three. The topic was in the news all year, but no major strides to disclose any new information. It was just kind of like a lot of pressure. So it stayed at number three. Number two was kind of a story that was everywhere, no matter where you looked. UFO reports on the rise. It seemed like every media outlet was talking about this, like this was a legitimate phenomenon. Unfortunately, yeah, I would say every U.S. state seemed like, I don't remember one here in Ohio, but I know virtually every state had an article about an increase in UFO sightings from the year prior. And of course, SpaceX, which, with the Starlink satellites we talked about, and the government release of UAP investigations, also task force investigating them. I'm sure that kind of stirred up some historical sightings, which led to an increased number of sightings. And it really didn't come from MUFON. It kind of came from NUFORC, the National UFO Reporting Center. And, none of these organizations really disseminate cases that happened years ago versus cases that are current. So, the numbers inflating whether it was true or not, which really wasn't true. It was just a lot of historical sightings coming to fact because of all the attention on these stories. And it, of course, leaves us with the number one story of 2020. I mean, how could you ignore this? COVID-19 shuts down the world, and it took the paranormal with it. And, a lot of that is the fact that it shut down almost all, I don't want to say all, but an overwhelming majority of paranormal conferences, conventions were canceled, delayed, um, put off until this year, or canceled completely. Some of them kept making the dance of, we'll put it out, we'll postpone it for 3 months. And then 3 months came and they said, well, 3 more months. And then they just ended up moving it. But we also had a lot of other weird stuff that happened along with that, not just the cancellation of the fear and the panic of the pandemic. With again, I mentioned toilet paper, hand sanitizer, all these other things that were disappearing off of store shelves. But we also had the Dean Koontz book, The Eyes of Darkness, that popped in, that people thought that he made a prediction that this thing would happen in China. Sylvia Browne also was claimed to have made a prediction in her 2008 book, The End of Days, Predictions and Prophecies About the End of the World. And it's the first and last story I've ever talked about Kim Kardashian in. She was kind of the catalyst behind putting that story out there. And of course, all that was just really people reaching for some sort of explanation for why is this happening now? Why is this happening to us? But very vague information, just as what psychics do. They throw vague things at you, and you make the connection based on that vague information. You put it together to make it sound like it's more significant than what it really was. But, a lot going on last year with all this. And of course, we were all caught up in all that. But what a crazy year it was. And most of the stuff is kind of the same rehash stuff we hear every year, year in, year out. Loch Ness Monster, UFOs. I think, well, Bigfoot wasn't there, but I like those weird off the wall stories, strange things, even the sad ones like Mad Mike Hughes, just one-offers that are a little bit different than the same stuff that we cover every year. The Arecibo University, as horrible as that was, things like that I think are pretty cool to have in there. Arecibo is still they're still using the smaller. They have a different type of dish, just a regular radio dish that they're using at this point. But I don't think they're going to rebuild it. There's talk about trying to rebuild it in the same spot it was, but they're still cleaning it up. Sad, very sad. I wish they would sell parts of it. I would definitely buy pieces of the panels. definitely would do that. That'd be pretty awesome. Anyway, the remainder of the show, we are going to start the top 10 stories of 2021. I'll tell you, I always get nervous. I never get nervous of being on the radio. I don't get nervous anymore about doing any kind of public speaking, and I could say that I've not always felt that way. Before, gosh, even after out of high school and college, I was terrified of standing up in front of two or three people. But having different jobs where I had to communicate information to large groups of people, doing conferences, conventions through the paranormal, having a job where I had to teach large groups of people, even small groups of people, standing up in front of them and talking in front of my peers on topics. All this experiences, I don't get nervous anymore. No matter how many times I screw things up, or I've probably 30, 40 times messed things up on this show already tonight, but I don't worry about it. I just convey information and I keep going. You don't worry about messing up. You just concentrate on what you're doing and try to entertain or educate, whatever your goal is. So I don't get nervous about that kind of stuff. If there's 20,000 people listening to the show, it doesn't affect me. But whenever I do the top 10 stories of any year, I get a little nervous because I know some people kind of want things to go a different way. And I know some people are going to be let down. I know some people are going to get upset about certain things. But this is all based on my opinion. So it's all subjective. And you can realign it however you want. This is just how I see it. It's not definitive. There's nothing that's going to prove one or the other over another. It's just how I feel. So take it as it is. It's just here to entertain. It's just here to reflect. And it's here to kind of teach us a lesson about the kind of things that we talk about in the news, the kind of things that we're fooled by, and the kind of stuff that we see year to year. And I've talked about this before, but the top 10 paranormal news stories, again, put together by my opinion, but they're also they're ranked by some criteria. So what have they done for the paranormal? Have they made a positive impact? Of course, some are hoaxes, misinterpretations, but even a hoax can create awareness of a paranormal subject. It can teach us something about what we think we know or what we thought we knew at the time. And these stories may be kind of bad, but sometimes we can reflect on the people behind them, such as the number one story 2 years ago, or I guess last year, the year before last, would be Stanton Friedman, the passing of Stanton Friedman. The year before that, the passing of Art Bell. So sometimes, we honor those that have paved the path for a lot of us to be where we're at, or to understand things that we may not have understood without them around. But some of these stories are they're just there. So that's the other kind of piece of criteria, is the virality. So how viral were these stories? And unfortunately, it seems like that's the overwhelming rank. But I do try to look at the importance of these stories into the whole kind of network of the paranormal. What do they bring to the table? But ultimately, it comes down to how viral a story was. And I guess I'll kind of ruin some of this stuff. We'll look at some of the stories that didn't make it first. Let's see. I don't want to say the ranking, but these are, I guess we'll say these are in no particular order. We had cattle mutilations, just missed the cut. I'll be honest, that was number 11. That was in the top 10 for a while until I finally wedged it out of there. I think it was in the top 10 a couple of years ago. But cattle mutilations happening out west. I believe it was Oregon this year. Almost made it. The Bigfoot River crossing video, the Cass River blob squatch, basically a video of this thing crossing a river that people thought was a Bigfoot, probably not. Almost made it. The French UFO hoax which was pretty recent, was also one that might have made the top 10 until I kind of rethought some stuff. The baby dinosaur video in Florida. So that happened earlier this year. A woman in Florida had her door cam capture what looked like a little, like, two-legged dinosaur running through her backyard. Still no word on what that was. I think it was a turkey, to be honest, just the way it was running. Number 15 was a bouquet of UFO triangles. So this was the video of the USS Russell back from 2019 that had been leaked to Jeremy Corbell, and it ended up being the triangles basically were created by a visual effect. It's pronounced bouquet, so it's just the way the lenses lined up. It made round lights looked triangle. It's just a natural thing. It's kind of an illusion that they use in movies and things. So we're actually more familiar with that than we're not. The next story that just missed it, and I was going to talk about it tonight, but I guess I will talk about it tonight. The James Webb Telescope. This was supposed to have been launched a few days ago. Actually, gosh, over the last couple of years, it was supposed to be launched up to, I think, about 3 years ago, but it's delayed again. And sitting on the launch pad, they had a telecommunications error, and it looks like it's going to hopefully launch on Christmas Eve. So this Friday, hopefully, the James Webb Telescope will also finally take off. It had a little bit of controversy as well this year with the naming. Of course, anything named after a person, anything you can find wrong with it, it's, the public is going to, have some negative things to say about it. Another story that didn't make it that I kind of wanted, but I know it's not a lot of people really care too much about the alligators. Multiple alligator sightings, Kansas, Pennsylvania, Iowa, which turned out to be a plush toy, Wisconsin escapee in May, June PA escapee, July one in Maryland, August and one in Indiana, mid-August Pennsylvania and Tennessee, and late August Massachusetts, and October one in Michigan, December one in Pennsylvania, and as well as one in Massachusetts. So these random alligator sightings, which unfortunately are just escape or people that are letting them go loose or escapees. We had the mysterious drone story. It happened earlier this year where a helicopter was chasing a drone that far exceeded what you would expect any consumer drone to be able to do as far as speed. I believe it was going 160 miles an hour into 40-mile-an-hour winds. And the helicopter chase lasted over an hour and a half, which is incredible. Technology shouldn't exist. And they said that it started to, like, it was losing its signal, but then it came back. And that story ended kind of ironically. The helicopter had to go get fuel. So they had to leave the chase, which is crazy. And somebody predicted this in the chat room. Yes, the zebras on the loose didn't make the top 10, very close. That story happening late this year in Maryland, kind of happening since September. I don't think I didn't cover it till October, but yeah, none of that made the top 10. So what did make the top 10? Well, let's crack it open. The top 10. I don't know how far we'll get, and that's okay. If I only cover a couple, that's okay. We've got next week, and even if I don't unveil the number one story until January, that's okay. We'll see what happens next week as far as the news is concerned. But we'll start going here. The number 10 story of 2021. No drum roll. We don't need that. But you could do it at home if you want. I guess that's fine. Unfortunately, the number 10 story is a topic that not a lot of people like. At least not here in the United States, but they sure love them in Scotland. And unfortunately, I don't think it's going to be a record year of sightings for the Loch Ness Monster. But the biggest story to happen out of there was the Loch Ness Monster drone hoax. And this took place on September 27th, where a canoeist named Richard Maver posted a video of personal drone footage to his YouTube channel, Richard Outdoors. Viewers quickly pointed out around 3 minutes 50 seconds into the video, a strange shape could be seen under the water. And it was a nice feel-good story there for a minute. Maver was in the area canoeing for charity, decided to take some 4K drone footage of the beach that he was at. And it was in this footage that people pointed out that he might have just accidentally filmed the most elusive water monster in the world. And of course, as they always do, Maver claims he did not see the shape in the water while he was filming. The story quickly spread to the media. Of course, Loch Ness Monster is anytime any news organization gets something like that, especially, I should say, in the United Kingdom, those the Telegraph and all those Daily Record and all those news outlets, anytime they get anything like that, they just run with it. Became the biggest Nessie sighting of 2021. And I'll be honest, I gave it a lot of grace. I didn't feel it was a hoax. I just thought it was a case of mistaken identity. I thought the object might have been a log or a sandbar. And, I don't know. In the back of my mind, I really felt like it wasn't a hoax. I was hoping it wasn't a hoax, because it just seems like every year we've got this big hoax of the Loch Ness Monster. Of course, we just talked about the catfish one from last year, and I was too generous. I don't think anybody really believed it. The news wanted you to believe it because they just want to sell advertising spots. Of course, they're there to get people to click on the stories. They don't care if you read it, to be honest with you. Most of these news organizations, they don't care about journalism. They just care about a headline and somebody clicking on it. So you'll scroll through the story. So maybe you'll click on an advertiser. Really and truly, unfortunately, that's what it's come down to. I hate to say it that way. I hate to be brutal, but that's the sad fact. Journalism is dead for the most part. Hopefully not on this show, but I try to do my due diligence on these stories. But yes, closer look at the video happened pretty quick within days, including the YouTube channel Para Breakdown, which, man, he just went on there and dropped the mic. It was like literally a minute, and he tore it apart, dropped the mic, and walked away. It was pretty good. Analyzing the object. Now, that's a very simple thing to do, and it was speculated from the get-go, and I ignored it. I said, no, you're giving the story too much credit by saying it's an elaborate hoax. It could have been a photograph layered into the video. I thought that was just too much, which, again, would create that as an intentional hoax. I didn't think it was that big of a deal, but looking at the shape closely, Sam Sheeran was able to pull the image out a little bit more of the video, was able to compare that image to a toy plesiosaur, and it's pretty much an exact copy of the photograph. Didn't do anything. I mean, at least like reverse the image or something, do something to confuse people, but it was an exact copy of the photograph that was embedded in the video. Didn't take very long. Longtime Nessie hunter and researcher Steve Feltham right away was interviewed about this story, and he felt immediately that the video was a fake. He said, quote, "There appears to be no natural movement in the object and an unlikely degree of illumination. I've spent many hours as a passenger in a microlight flying low over the loch trying to spot a silhouette in the dark waters, and things just do not show up that clearly. It looks almost like the object is illuminated," unquote. And you have to keep in mind that Loch Ness is not like a lot of lakes and reservoirs like what I kayak in or what I've used to being in, which are fairly clear. There's heavy peat in the surrounding hillsides that really, really muddies up this water. It's very dark and dingy. It's not polluted. It's just dingy with the peat that is in there, and that water is always moving around and mixing that stuff up. So yeah, even on the shoreline, you're not going to get that kind of clarity. And while Para Breakdown showed their video with the image highlighted, Steve saw evidence of his own. So he pointed out Mavers actually had used a small section of the drone footage elsewhere in his holiday video, but the clip he duplicated did not have the Nessie image superimposed onto it, whereas the drone sequence did. It's utter nonsense. A schoolboy mistake in the world of hoaxing. Never show the investigators your before and after workings, unquote. So yeah, slam dunk. and very easily destroyed as a hoax. It was pretty quick. Now, if this was one that had lasted uh, any longer, maybe it might have gone up higher in the top 10. But again, we see it every year, and we should always be at the ready. You know what's going to happen pretty much every year. Someone's going to hoax a Loch Ness Monster sighting because everybody pays attention to the Loch Ness Monster, whether we like it or not. It's there. So why is it in the top 10? Of course, the Loch Ness Monster. Of course, gets more headlines around the world than any other cryptid other than Bigfoot. But I'd say some years it gets more than Bigfoot. And despite a lackluster year of sightings, the story was by far the biggest for Nessie. So why is it only number 10? Despite the interesting backstory and the, quote, I didn't see it when it happened, unquote, angle, the story was quickly torn apart by internet sleuths. A lot of people tore it apart even the second it hit the internet. So, of course, had it last longer or became a larger story, it might have been the biggest hoax of the year. But was it? I don't know. Let's look at number 9 real quick. Number 9 was pilots report UFO UAP missile over New Mexico. A member of the flight crew of the American Airlines Flight 2292 radioed to Albuquerque Center they had encountered something strange. And this encounter happened February 21st at 1:19 Central Standard Time over the northeast corner of New Mexico. The transmission was, quote, do you have any targets up here? We just had something go right over the top of us. I hate to say this, but it looked like a long cylindrical object that almost looked like a cruise missile type of thing, moving really fast right over the top of us, unquote. And that was it. The rest of the flight apparently was uneventful. The plane landed in Phoenix, and that was it. And the Steve Douglas published the 14-second audio on his Deep Blue Horizon weblog. So nobody really came forward with anything else. It was acknowledged that it happened. And there was a lot of kind of speculation in the analysis of when all this stuff was seen and when the responses were. And like I said, it came out as the FAA said, yeah, a pilot did report seeing an object over New Mexico. But controllers did not see an object on their radio scopes. So we don't know. This one just kind of went down as a big question. So why did it make the top 10? Well, private pilots. I mean, one of the biggest private pilot sightings of a purported UFO in recent memory, and was splashed on every newspaper around the world. So that was a big deal, a big story. And, you know, it's different than the military people who see things because that gets filtered. You know, they have to report to so-and-so and it gets filtered down. These reports, obviously they reported to the FAA, but sometimes that information is pretty easy to get a hold of. Why it's only number 9, this report may have been big news, but since it never had any follow-up, it quickly disappeared as quickly as it had appeared, just like the strange cylindrical object. And I got a couple minutes here, but I'm going to squeeze in number 8. It's a story. It shouldn't be a shocker that it made the top 10. Patterson-Gimlin film is number 8. And in July, it was a hoax. But in December, which we just talked about, it might be real. So yes, the October 22nd, 1967, 53-second long encounter of Patty near Bluff Creek, California, filmed by Roger Patterson, observed by Bob Gimlin. This video has been the center of controversy, the center of belief since then. And whether you believe in all the stuff that's surrounding it, people claim that they were the person in the costume and the video is fake and all this and that. Granted, they didn't have the technology to fake it. It's either a costume or it's a Bigfoot. That's pretty much your only two options. And let's see, there was I'm trying to remember the date when this happened, but Richter Riolo, cast member of Spike TV's $10 million Bigfoot bounty, came out and said that basically he's got Bob Gimlin on video pretty much confessing that it's fake. And he's not going to release this video until Bob and his wife has passed away. Of course, Bob Gimlin refutes this and says that this isn't true. So I don't know. I got a sad feeling that when sadly Bob Gimlin and his wife do pass away, that it's going to come out anyway, and it's going to destroy his legacy. You know, his all these years of saying it did happen, it did happen. It's not fake that I know, and it doesn't matter because this is embedded in culture. You're not going to make it go away, but you're also not going to prove it unless we do find a Bigfoot, and that's what happened later in the year with the proof is out there, which just happened here in earlier December, where they showed the video. They were able to redo it, remanufacture it with new technology, with artificial intelligence, taking all the known copies of the film, kind of putting them together, and just creating the best frames of the frames, stabilizing it, and giving us the clearest view ever. And I thought I'd seen it in 4K, look really clear, look really good. But I tell you, when you watch this episode, my goodness, things just jump out that you've never seen before. It's just amazing. And of course, I grew up with the jittery, moving all over the screen original film, and it's only recently have we seen stabilized. And, of course, if you're younger, you probably remember that more now because it's been a shorter period of time. But the episode itself really kind of said, hey, this might be real. And, again, it doesn't matter how you feel about it, whether you think it's real, whether you think it's fake, who you believe or who you don't believe. There's no way to prove it. There's no way to disprove it at this point. And we don't know. We don't know. So why is it in the top 10? Well, the Patterson-Gimlin film is the most iconic piece of cryptid folklore ever. It's formed the mold for every other fabricated video for Bigfoot. I mean, every time you watch, you just go on YouTube, type in Bigfoot sighting. They're all the same. They're all very similar, I should say. The fact that it's heavily debated proves just how iconic it really is. No one can explain it away or say that it's real. It's not going anywhere. Why it's only number 8? While both ends of the spectrum were on display this year, neither story seemed to gain a lot of attention. And the good news is the video will live on as the most debated piece of folklore in history. Yeah, it's I mean, you just think about it. It's my thought that you look at anywhere in the paranormal, there's a lot of cool UFO videos, cool photographs of ghosts and a lot of other purported creatures, most of which have come out as fake. We know so-and-so created a mold for certain Bigfoot videos. We know that some of them were photoshopped. We know. Or in some we speculate, but this is it's all or nothing. Either this was a person in a very elaborate costume, or it was Bigfoot, and that's it. So we'll do one more story. Why not? Why not? Number 7 on the list, and don't worry, if you gotta go, you gotta go. We'll recap all this next week. Number 7, 2021 was the year of the serval. Now, servals have escaped pretty much every year. Not something I've really covered because it's just one random one here and there, and they usually find them pretty quick. But it seemed like this was happening all the time, and really stirred up some debate about owning exotic animals, and as well as the laws that go with owning those. On Wednesday, June 30th, Christine Frank woke up to find a large serval hovering just 6 inches from her face. Problem is, it wasn't her cat. She didn't know what it was. She woke up and there's this giant cat standing there staring at her. I don't know. I'd be a little freaked out too, especially since I'm used to my dog being on my bed. The cat had entered the house through an open door. Christine she managed to scare it off her bed and said it actually cowered in the corner. After getting out of the room, her husband was able to open another door, allowing the cat to go back outside. The cat hung around and was in a nearby golf course where it eventually disappeared. And I say large serval, but about 2 feet tall. But it's a wild cat. And it was obvious to the woman it was not an ordinary house cat. Um, Serval has the same size and diet as a fox. So they're pretty much like a giant fox, big ears. They've been kept for pets for thousands of years, stretching back to ancient Egypt. So it's not new that we have these, but they're still wild animals. Authorities searched for the serval, which was named Nala, finally captured it, and hope to relocate the animal to an accredited sanctuary. Anna Fife, who was the owner of the long-necked, long-eared serval, says that she had had the cat while living in South Carolina, where it's legal to own the cat. She's currently living in Georgia, attending college at the University of Georgia, where the cat had escaped. And Nala typically stays at her parents' house in South Carolina, but she brought it to Georgia to stay with her for emotional support after a relationship ended. So I guess you break up with somebody, you go buy a giant exotic pet. That'll make you feel better. Of course, this created a little bit of controversy. She wants her cat back and she can't live without it. And, it doesn't harm anybody because it's mine kind of situation. And, of course, the other people on the other side, the Animal Defense League fired back and said wild cats are not meant to be pets. So people were kind of going back and forth on this. And Fife said the cat was declawed, slept in her bed, and, argued the legality. She's illegal in Georgia, but her home is in South Carolina. So why should she be taken away? So that one just kind of set it off. And, of course, we had in December. That's a different story. That's so we've had some really dangerous sightings of these people injured, people attacked by servals over the years. So yeah, they're not very friendly all the time. They can be for a while, but they're wild animals. September, we had San Diego, California area, another serval scaring residents and as well as eating chickens. And this it escaped back on August 7th and eluded people for about a month. And it was finally captured, but returned to the owner. And there was another one here in September, Huntsville, Alabama. It was the servals escaped from 256 Exotics, a pet store in Huntsville. And yeah, these are escape experts. They will escape any kind of enclosure if given the opportunity. Even Carol Baskin of Tiger King weighed in on this escape of these animals, asking the USDA to cite the facility and seize the exotic cats, send them to a legitimate sanctuary. Do not buy, breed, or sell or allow public contact with wild animals. These animals don't, it's not that they belong in cages. It's just that it's not legal to release them because they're not native to the U.S. They're native to Africa. And so that controversy continued. And then in mid-October, we had the cousins to servals, caracals, were pretty close. They have a little bit higher tuft in their ears. And the, what was it? Bam Bam, Pebbles, Wasabi, and Fire. So at least two of the medium-sized cats escaped their elaborate enclosure, tiptoed through the neighborhood. They closed schools. And they made it sound as if a 500-pound tiger was on the loose. They issued citations to the woman. They made her take it out of the neighborhood. Caracals are quick runners, long legs. They're also known to be able to leap at least 12 feet in the air, like a serval. And they're highly escaped, escape artists. And, we say, well, what's the worst that can happen? Well, a 7-year-old boy in 2001 was attacked by a serval. The declawed cat, so it was declawed, knocked the kid to the ground, bit him on the neck before being chased off by bystanders. The boy was in the hospital for weeks, several stitches. had to get a lot of shots to avoid infections and things, so it's not a pleasurable thing. June of 2000, a man was walking a serval in New York when it suddenly attacked a 4-year-old boy. The boy needed plastic surgery after a bite to the neck and face. And the owner of the cat also received a number of stitches to the hand. October of 2019, a serval was shot and killed after attacking a dog and nearly attacking a sheriff's deputy in Fairfield County, Ohio. A serval attacked a child during a birthday party at a zoo in Indiana in 2018. This, you can go watch that video if you want. Attacked a child and was hanging on to the kid. So these are animals that can, they're like cats, and cats sometimes act kind of strange. Cats are cute and all that, but they can attack, and these are wild animals. They've not been able to be domesticated after thousands of years. So we're not going to just change it because, we want to hug it and let it live in our bed. They can bite, they can tear, they can kill small animals, they can injure children pretty bad. So there is that threat. Just think of, cats scratch their owners all the time, but just imagine a cat that's 4 times as big as a regular cat living in your house. It's a pretty scary thing. So why is it number 10? These escaped exotic pets have been popping up for years, but this year these stories were front and center in the media and social media and stirred up a lot of debate on a variety of topics surrounding exotic animal ownership, which we haven't had too much lately, except for these alligators, of course. So why is it number 7? Serval stories were outnumbered by alligator discovered in places where they don't belong as well. And probably the most viral stories dealing with escaped animals this year, whereas alligators historically have been those big stories. So with that, we've wrapped up 10, 9, 8, and number 7. So next week, we'll see how far we get. Hopefully, we can get through the rest of the top 10. We'll talk about, though we'll kind of rehash that top 10, and we'll plow through the rest of them next week, so we can start the year fresh. I think that's probably the best thing to do. So Merry Christmas to everybody out there. I'll see you next week. But for now, keep your eyes in the skies. Keep a watch out for Santa. Don't forget to leave cookies out. And always keep your mind slightly ajar. Above all else, don't stop believing. For the Paranormal News Insider, this is Dr. Brian D. Parsons reporting.